Hello and welcome to Talking Books. I'm Jill de Villiers. In today's world, with all of its available social media options, there are so many more places to express one's dissatisfaction, unhappiness, or general negativity. It is refreshing then to read a book that is openly positive, optimistic, and hopeful. Today's book is Smile, Dammit, by radio host, business strategist, keynote speaker, and author Howard Feldman. Howard, thank you so much for coming in and chatting to us about your book.
Great pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Tell me about when you became an optimist, when you gained the superpower of positivity.
So I'm always asked that question, and the question is normally couched in, are you born an optimist? Are we born with a predetermined nature? And the truth is I don't know the answer to that, but I do remember spending many, many hours alone as a kid. It was in South Africa in the 1970s when I was a young child. There wasn't TV, there weren't cell phones, and I was never a good sleeper. I never slept. So I spent a lot of time in my own head, and I remember working out that if I thought about thing A, then it would make me sad. And if I thought about something else, it would make me happy. So I worked out and I learned to think about the things that actually made me happy. So I think it was as a child, and it's a policy and a strategy that I've used in various parts of my life as I grew up, as I studied, as I worked, etc.
And you were reading quite heavy books, and people were questioning, how can you be positive if you read such heavy books?
Well, even this book, my father read it, and he's never been a great fan of my writing, to be fair, but he said to me, I thought this book's meant to be only about smiling, but there's some heavy parts in it. And I said, yeah, because being happy isn't just plastering a smile on your face. You actually need to understand what you're dealing with. You need to go sometimes to those places and understand who you are and understand what you have in order to have real happiness, which is an internal space, not something that's purely external.
So a lot of this book is about self-awareness.
Absolutely.
And how to get there. And you use different stories, different articles to start a discussion on a particular area, and then you give points at the end of the chapter in which people can go and think and apply that lesson to their lives.
Right.
And I think that works really, really well.
Well, I wanted to make it as accessible as possible, really. That was my point, my intention in this book.
So this is your third book. How did this one come about? Tell me a little bit about your other two books, and then
so the first book was very, very much a catharsis for me. I had studied, I had worked really hard, I'd grown this commodity trading business for 15 years, and then sadly in the South African type of scenario I was attacked. It was a crime, a follow me kind of crime, and then I was fine, I carried on working, and then 3 months later, to the day, it happened, and this time it happened at my house as I was driving in, and I had to make a decision to, this fight or flight kicked in, and I had to make a decision whether to give in to these, the thieves, the rogues, or whether to try and flee, which I was never going to be able to do. All I was going to do is drag them closer to my family, and it was a very, very real turning point for me, because I had to make a decision to give in to another process that I couldn't control. And when I got out of my car and when they had fled, I think I was a changed person, and I made a decision then that I needed to reevaluate. I got out of that business. I went on my own journey in terms of therapy and understanding who I really was, what were my drivers, why did I have this need, this desperate need to show my material success versus which is an external type of happiness versus an internal. And I wrote my first book. It was called Carry On Baggage, and it was quite well received. I'm very, very pleased with how it was received. My second book really came about because I just started writing at that point, and I was writing I still do write for News 24 for various publications around the world, and I put a lot of my thoughts together on the Zuma years, on the Jacob Zuma years here in South Africa. The third book was much more fresh. I do a lot of keynote talks. I work with companies in terms of positivity, body language, and I thought that I saw this need, a desperate need to actually find a way to be happy, because it saddened me that so many of us live by this notion that we don't know what we've got until it's gone, and we don't have to do that. And so I gave myself a challenge to write a book in 30 days. I had done the research before, in fairness, because of my talks, and I wrote this in 30 days.
And you also do the morning radio drive show on High FM.
Yeah, I do.
And I think you use a lot of your encounters with your listeners as well in the book, and stories of how they respond to you. This morning you had a chat with Musi Maimane.
I did.
And also you had some negative comments. How do you deal with those negative comments, and how do you feel about the negativity that's sort of in the air at the moment?
So first of all, I don't mind the negative comments at all. In fact, I said to my sister the other day, do you think there's something wrong with me that I really feel validated by getting some of these, how would you sow this or you sow that? But the truth is that I like it because I know that I'm making people think, and I know we're engaging in real conversations. So, but the reality is that my morning show, because I've got these listeners that are interacting with me all the time, is an incredible social study. So I can push things a little bit and understand, and I talk about it in my book, and you might be referring to that when I love spring, and I always say that in Johannesburg the blossoms are out in August. Let's call August spring, and people get really annoyed because at the middle of July I'm starting to say, well, we're nearly in spring, and people get annoyed. How would it's not spring? It's not spring. And the more I pushed it, the more angry they got. And what I realized is it's coming from a place of fear, because winter we've got no expectations around winter. Winter is cold and there's nothing growing and it's brown. Winter never disappoints us. But the minute we decide that it's spring, we're expecting something. We're expecting better weather. We're expecting blossoms. And people are scared. They are actually afraid to say, okay, it is spring, I can expect a little bit more. And that's what I realized, and that's what some of the ideas that I put into the book. There is a tremendous amount of negativity at the moment. South Africa is going through a very negative period. We sit in, when we've been sitting in the dark. Remember load shedding? So last week. But, we kind of forgot about it already. But there's nothing more depressing than sitting in load shedding. And I wrote an article for News 24, and I said, we don't need to go to Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. We're not in the concentration camps. Yes, we don't have power, and yes, it's miserable, but it'll pass, and we'll get through it. I don't mean deny it. I mean you hold those people accountable who have caused the situation. But let's understand a little bit of perspective. We are very blessed in South Africa. We have, I think, the kindest, funniest, most wonderful, irreverent people in the world. We'll get through it. If we choose to.
I think it's after that chapter in your worth considering comments, that you say to people, you help people think about how to stop complaining, or how to get away from complainers and being a complainer yourself.
Right.
How do you achieve that?
Well, I think that we all have these experiences, and we have them over and over again in every little part of our lives. And I specifically in the book bring silly things that maybe makes me look childish, but we all feel that. There's a child in all of us. We don't get invited to something and we think we should, or we don't get told about something. We've got to change that narrative. And even if we say, right, you know what, I have every right to be deeply offended, how can I deal with it in a different way? What if I did A, B, C, or D? What if I said just was very pleasant, and when I'm not feeling so miserable, I say to that person, in the future, won't you do me a favor and let me know about that? You'll find that everything changes, and we have to constantly do it. And it's easy to say, but because it affects us every single day. We are all very, very vulnerable to our emotional state. So we have a fight with a spouse or a partner in the morning, and we leave the house in a bad mood, and someone's taken our parking bay. We're not going to say, oh, don't worry, I'll park two bays down. We're going to overreact to that, and that's what we have to be aware of. Why are we reacting in certain situations?
That also links to the chapter that you have on the difficult person in the meeting.
Yes.
That you generally tend to have in whatever meeting you have, one person who drags the whole meeting down and derails it completely.
Right.
And then the child within acting up, and we need to recognize, oh, that's what is happening to that person. Or am I that person who's causing that
Which
kind
is very
of
hard.
logjam?
It's very hard for us to know that we're the child in the room. But sometimes we can be honest enough to understand that maybe I am behaving a little bit irrationally.
You give some pointers then, if you have a person who's sitting and behaving like that on a consistent basis in a meeting, how to handle that, how to say, yes, we hear you, but let's look at it in a different perspective.
Right. The story that I tell, which has been attributed to Sigmund Freud, and it's not 100% sure that he was the person who came up with the story, as he talks about the fact that he was walking in a dark street in Vienna, and he sees his friend looking for something under a lamp. They didn't have load shedding, I guess. And he looks and he says to his friend, "What, have you lost something?" And he said, "Yes, I've lost my pocket watch." And he said, "Let me help you." And he helps him, and they look and they look and they look and they can't find it. And eventually says to his friend, "Let's retrace your footsteps. Did you actually lose it here? Maybe you lost it somewhere else." And the friend says, "No, I definitely didn't lose it here." And he looks at him and says, "So why are we looking here?" And he says, "Because it's light here. I can't look over there, it's dark, I'll never find anything." And of course the point of that story is sometimes we do need to go and find things in the dark. It's much easier to look in the light. It's much easier when you're sitting in a boardroom and somebody's dealing with something obscure, they're making an issue of something that they shouldn't be making an issue of. It's much easier to think that is the issue, instead of saying, hold on, what is in the dark here? What do they need to bring into the light, and what do I need to bring into the light? When we behave in a certain way, when we trigger it in a certain way, what is it that we need to go and find in that dark, uncomfortable, unpleasant place and bring it to the light so it doesn't have that power over us?
And on a slightly, finally, a lighter note is the thing that you talk about your marriage of 28 years and how you and your wife have had a different way, a perception of going on holiday.
Right.
And finally you've reached a middle way.
Yeah.
So tell me about that too.
We're very different. We're very different. So my wife, first of all, loves marriage enrichment programs, which I can't bear. I absolutely can't stand them. We keep, and she keeps wanting to go on them, and I just don't. And then we also realized that I need people. I love people. I love the energy of people. And to me, that's my way of connecting to the world. Her way is much more insular. She could go with me to a desert island and could spend weeks there. I can spend maybe an hour and a half, and I have to come home or find somebody, find people, or find something to do because I get bored. And we've had to find, and the interesting thing is, in the earlier part of our marriage, perhaps when we were children, that was a concern for both of us because we felt insecure about what I need. I felt insecure about what I needed. Do I need people, and is that a problem? And she felt insecure about hers. And it takes maturity and it takes adulthood to eventually say, okay, let's find a holiday that we can go on where we can have a bit of both and navigate those. And I think that's the point, is that you find really true happiness if you're comfortable with who you are, and you don't need to apologize for being who you are. It's so liberating. It really does give you the sense of positivity.
Howard Feldman, thank you so much for coming in and chatting to us. It was great having you here.
It's wonderful.
And I hope your book does very well.
Thank you.
And my guest is Howard Feldman, and the book is Smile, Dammit. And thanks for watching. Until next time, I'll see you then. Goodbye.